Hello, fellow grave crawlers, and welcome to ZTV Reviews. I am Paper Zombie, your host with you as always. And on today's show, we're going to be talking about Episode 8, the season finale of It, Welcome to Derry. So let's get it started. Spoilers incoming. We pick right up where the last episode left off, with the reawakening of It. After blanketing the town in a dense fog, It decides to pack up shop and head out of Derry. After stopping by the kids' school to grab some food for the road, It does its best Pied Piper impression as their dead-lighted bodies hover behind its traveling wagon. Rose and Taniel, not Daniel as I thought it was, lend a huge helping hand this episode. Rose's farm is where herself, Taniel, Leroy, Charlotte, Hank, and Dick unite. And it's through Rose and Taniel that we find out that the only way to stop it from escaping is to create a new pillar with the shard that Lily possesses. But the shards have a quirk. The damn things have a will of their own that makes them want to return to their point of origin, which is the crash site underneath the house on Nebolt Street. The further the shards are taken away by a person from the crash site, the more damage the shards do to a person's mind, to the point that they can essentially possess the person and inflict their will upon them. The shards can also put up a physical resistance too, which can slow a person and halt them where they stand. Aware that Dick can shine, which can help them locate the shard, Rose is able to give him something that will help shut out the voices and visions of the dead that have been plaguing him since his mental lockbox was open. And once that's back in control, Dick is able to not only lead our adult crew to the location of the shard, and thus our kids' crew, but is also strong enough for another round of mental combat with it, by locking it into a scenario in an attempt to get it to believe that it is Bob Gray and not the interdimensional being it truly is. But General Shaw blows that whole facade when him and those airmen still loyal to the project intercept and attack our adults. This allows it to escape from Dick's hold and lets General Shaw finally come face to face with the monster from his past. A monster that remembers him. I think General Shaw still could have stood a chance at this point if he would have just let it in on his plan. I think it honestly would have been good with the arrangement. But instead, General Shaw tries to assert his authority over it. And it shows him just what it thinks about his authority. So it all comes down to the kids making it to the new pillar spot with the shard. And that thing puts up a hell of a fight, taking all of the kids' strength just to push it to the new spot. But it's not about to give up with freedom oh so close. So it finally takes on a form that up until now we've only ever read about. The dreaded giant bird form. But even that isn't strong enough to help it when the kids get a helping hand from Rich. Our short stack gets to return as a spirit and takes his victory lap as the extra force that helps his friends make it to the new pillar spot and place the shard. This, of course, spells get your ass back in that bed and go to sleep for it, as the pillars reactivate and the cage is locked once again. In the aftermath, Hank and Ronnie head out of Derry with the help of Charlotte, whose civil rights connections lend a hand to help get the two of them off to a new life. Lily and Marge continue their friendship, and we know that at least one of them will remain in Derry. And that one is Marge. Why? Because it revealed a little something to her during the struggle to place the shard. She will grow up to marry Wentworth Tozier, and it's through that union that we'll get Richie. And now we know why Richie is named as he is. It's a nod to Marge's first love, who sacrificed his life to keep her safe. Leroy and Charlotte plan to take Will and leave Derry as well. But Rose offers them the chance to join up with her tribe, and the other tribes to help keep watch over its cage and to ensure that no other military branch tries to come along and repeat General Shaw's idiocy. Believe it or not, it's Charlotte with whom the offer sits heavy with. And it's she who convinces Leroy to remain in Derry and take the farmhouse and land that Rose has offered them, as well as the responsibility to help watch over its cage. And this leads us into a problem that I'll discuss in just a moment. Dick decides to head out of Derry too, having taken an offer from a friend to become a cook at a certain hotel, where a whole new adventure awaits him. And to bring everything full circle, we catch up with Ingrid, who has been taken in as a resident at the very place she once worked at. We see that it has driven her obsession with trying to save her father into nutcase territory. So she gets locked up for life. One day, during Ingrid's older years, a commotion brings her out of her room and into another, where she comes face to face with a young Beverly, whose mother was a resident at Juniper Hill that maybe, or not, took her own life. And it's with Ingrid's trademark phrase to a distraught Beverly that the episode comes to a close.
You know what they say about Derry. No one who dies here ever really dies.
And that's where this 8th and season-ending episode leaves us. Right at the front door of It Chapter 1. And it would have been a pretty sweet setup, if not for the problem that I was talking about earlier. And that problem is the way It Chapter 1 wrote Mike and Leroy's characters. Don't forget that we do meet Leroy in It Chapter 1, but he's a far cry from the Leroy we come to know in It Welcome to Derry. And yes, I know. Welcome to Derry was written after It Chapter 1. But having said that, why wasn't that taken into account? Why set the audience up for a nifty spin on the book version of Leroy when that's not what we see in the movie? And why set up the scene for the book version of Mike when that's not what we see in the movies? I know I'd be confused if I were the audience walking out of Welcome to Derry in the It Chapter 1. I'd wonder why Leroy doesn't seem to know that it's hunting season for it and that his grandson is prime dark meat. I wonder where Rose and the rest of the tribes were, as well as Charlotte. I wonder why Mike doesn't at least know what he did in the book, which is the history of Derry and its tragedies. Because I just can't see Leroy keeping Mike in the dark about it when they're supposed to be helping to protect the cage. But there's no way that can be fixed now unless the writers can time travel. And speaking of time travel, there's already a season 2 and 3 in the works for this series. And that's exactly what both seasons will involve. Us going back through time to even earlier battles with it. Season 2 wants to bring us the answer to that vehicle that we saw that was pulled out of the ground in episode 2. And season 3 wants to take us back even further to 1908 when it met Bob Gray. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't we just see all of that this season? We were told what was up with that unearthed vehicle from episode 2 in episode 3. And the amount of story that was given for that was just fine. There's no need to go any deeper. And we've already gotten the It Meets Bob Gray story, but since the writers already messed up their chance to go any deeper with that, what more is there to tell? Nothing. The story is over. If the writers wanted to do a 3-season event, then they should have let season 1 be the story of Rose, her ancestors, and the establishment of the cage to hold it. That would have given the viewers the origin of it, explained why it is centered in Derry, and introduced us to a young General Francis Shaw. Then season 2 could have told the story of Bob Gray, how he came to meet it, and what happened as a result. That would have given the viewers all of the Bob Gray and Ingrid backstory, as well as that of the circus and the carnival, and cemented Rose, her tribe, and the other tribe's dedication to protecting the cage. Season 3 then could have been what we got with the first season. And since we wouldn't have needed to have flashbacks, that time could have been dedicated to fleshing out Maddie's character and story in the pilot, and to better set up Teddy, Phil, Lily, and Ronnie's characters and their relationship with Maddie. This way, by the end of the pilot, which would have been the car scene of course, viewers would have actually felt something from Maddie when it takes him. This would have helped the second episode as well, because it would have created a better foundation for the kids, especially Lily, when it comes to their feelings about Maddie's vanishing and their desire to go looking for him. This also would have let the theater scene be a lot more impactful, and would have allowed viewers to feel something with the deaths of Teddy, Phil, and Susie. And this also would have helped out the fifth episode as well, with Maddie's full return, making that much more impactful. Then, it would have been forward from there until the end of the season to sit viewers right at the door to It Chapter 1 and close the series out. Bam! Done! With no need to feign creativity or originality by telling the story backwards. So, I think it's safe to say that this is the end of the road for me when it comes to this series. It was a good ride. Bumpy as hell at the start, but pretty well smoothed out by the end. Overall, I give it a B, which would have been an A if it weren't for the Leroy and Mike discrepancies. If I were the writers, I wouldn't do a season 2 or 3. I'd just let things end with this one season and go out on top with the story told and done. But I get the feeling that the writers won't be that smart. And if that's the case, then the only place left for this series to go is down. Down a road that we, as viewers, have already been down before. Alright, that's it and that's all for me. Thanks as always for watching, and I'll catch you next time.